Russia just invaded Ukraine, and unlike yesterday when I said something quite similar, there is no sort of or kind of here. Russia literally, categorically just invaded Ukraine. This is pretty much a worst case scenario. I said myself that I didn't think it would happen, at least not for a couple of years, but I was wrong. There's nothing else to it. Markets everywhere are tanking all over the world. US futures are down 2 to 3% across the board. European markets are down 5% since their open just a couple hours ago at the time of making this video. The Russian stock market was even down almost 50% before the Russian government banned short selling. Gas and oil prices are of course spiking. Brent crude is sitting just above $100 and it's probably going to go even higher. Nearly every nation in the world is making appeals to Russia to lay down their arms, and the vast majority are condemning Russia's actions as well. It is very clear here, 100%, there is no room for disagreement that Russia is the aggressor. They are the invader. They have literally just started military action against a country of 40 million people. And so markets are understandably a little bit terrified, they're shaken, and that's why they're declining. But what exactly has happened so far? Well, Russia has declared that it started military action to aid separatists in eastern Ukraine, in Luhansk and Donetsk. They've come out with statements claiming that they are targeting military command points, weapons and ammo depots, strategically valuable points in general. Their aircraft are bombing cities in Ukraine, as are rockets and artillery. There is plenty video evidence around the world to see that. To make matters worse, ground troops have invaded as well, with Russian troops, soldiers, infantry and tanks invading from at least 3 directions. East of Ukraine, in the disputed areas Donetsk and Luhansk, Russia has invaded Ukraine through them. North of Ukraine, on the Russian and Belarusian borders as well, last night there were reports of border checkpoints in Ukraine being attacked, and we now know that Russian troops have invaded them from the north as well. Belarusian troops appear to be supporting them in their attack as well, though as of yet, the Belarusian government hasn't said anything. Then, from the south, from Crimea, those Russian tanks with white painted Zs on them that the US military indicated had been formed into fighting units, they have now invaded from the south, crossing from Crimea into Ukraine. There are even some early reports of Russian separatists from Moldova attacking Ukraine from the west, but as of yet, this is not confirmed. Now, the Russian argument here is that they are just helping the Russian separatists in the east part of the country, but this is an utter falsification, it's an utter lie, and no one should believe that. Have a brief look at any map of Ukraine, and the fact that Kiev is being bombed and attacked while it is hundreds of miles from any Russian separatists should tell you all you need to know. The same can of course be said with the troops invading through the Belarusian border from Crimea and even Moldova as well. These points are nowhere near the separatists in the eastern part of the country. This is a full-on invasion of Ukraine. Now, to make matters even worse, some parts of Poland very close to Ukraine on the eastern part of the country are reporting air raid sirens. Now, Poland is a full member of NATO, and this would be absolutely huge and monumental if Russia were to push further into Eastern Europe, but as of yet, there is nothing confirmed on that front. It is, however, very, very clear what's happening here. Russia has fully invaded Ukraine, nothing less. Now, those people in Ukraine are obviously, understandably, scrambling. The military are preparing to fight, it appears. Apparently, 5 Russian aircraft have been shot down in the east of the country, though Russia denies this. There are also reports of soldiers who have been killed. Again, though, it's a little bit here or there. We're not 100% sure what the numbers are at this point. Thankfully, Ukraine do have access to loads of NLAWs and Javelin missiles, anti-tank weapons that can destroy Russian armor, and they're going to be needed, as we've seen these T-90 tanks, maybe even T-14 Armatas heading into the country. To be clear, one side here is the favourite and one is the underdog, but this isn't a foregone conclusion yet. Now, in cities like Kiev, civilians are of course trying to get out. They are pushing westwards, just trying to run away from the conflict, but it seems to be near impossible as traffic jams have been clogging up the cities. Let's not forget here that thousands of people are about to die purely because of Vladimir Putin. Now, there will be Russian shills in the comments down below this video, as there always are, saying that the US is the worst, that Canada is worse than Russia. And very simply, you people can take your cowardly rhetoric elsewhere. I'm not going to engage with you because you can't be reasoned with. A sovereign nation was just invaded and thousands of people are about to die, and people are literally dying as you watch this video right now, and still you support the aggressor. You are morally bankrupt. There's nothing else to it. Now, Western governments are, of course, putting out lots of strong rhetoric, but no action as of yet can actually be seen. There are claims of serious sanctions coming into force, and we should expect some, but to be honest, I don't expect much here. It does seem pretty clear that no NATO forces will be deployed to fight. The UK basically said as much. They said that Ukraine is not a member of NATO and our forces will not be deployed. There will be no boots on the ground. Most other countries have just refused to comment on such things, but we can expect the same across the board. So, should we expect sanctions? Well, yes, we should, but we shouldn't expect them to be harsh enough or impactful enough to really make a difference here. What could happen though? Well, the big one is that Russia could be cut off from SWIFT. This should happen, to be honest, and it would be incredibly weak and cowardly from the West if it doesn't. Biden has been talking about how they're able to do it for months now, using it as a bargaining chip to try and draw Russian troops away from Ukraine, and it clearly hasn't worked up to this point. If they don't use it now, they never will. The next thing that could be done would basically be to ban all businesses from working with the Russian state to ensure that their foreign currency reserves are worthless and that they don't have any inflows of foreign capital. Again, this is pretty much necessary at this point. If it doesn't happen now, then it will never happen. Now, really, one of the most important things that should be done, but that likely won't, will be to target Russian oligarchs. Now, there are many of them in the West. They've built their lives here because they don't want to live in Russia, of course not, and they could and should be targeted for their support allows Putin to remain in power. Will this actually happen though? Well, that's very unlikely because frankly, our governments are too cowardly. They're too worried about what might happen to the property market in London if 1,000 of the £65 million apartments that are owned by Russian oligarchs are seized. Now, one new development is that Ukraine might be allowed to join the EU. Now, to be honest, this doesn't really do anything. It's just symbolic, especially if Russia takes over complete control of the country. But the EU is incredibly weak, so they haven't really got much else to put into play here. The individual member states of the EU can do more though. Nord Stream 2 is undoubtedly dead at this point, at least it should be. It should never even be considered again, and it does seem like Germany is finally on side here. Now, once more, Russia could mostly be turned into a pariah state, but again, our pathetic governments are very unlikely to go this far. Macron, for example, is convinced that he and Putin are actually good friends, and Johnson is incapable of not going to parties while in lockdown. He's far too weak to stand up to someone like Putin, and Biden is frankly a senile old man with dementia. He can hardly walk up a set of stairs, let alone stand against someone like Putin. The sad truth is here that we're led by the weak. It's very, very simple. Now, what is Putin actually doing? Well, I don't actually know. That's why I was wrong about him invading Ukraine. If I knew what was going on, I would have got it right. My theory in the past was that basically Putin's main target is to destabilize the West, and this does sort of still hold up to this development, but not really. If we look at the news, we look at our governments, we look at our markets, we are destabilized, we are in chaos, markets are tanking, and people are terrified of the next world war starting right now. But this is a crazy development, a crazy escalation just to destabilize the West, and I would have expected Putin to drag this ordeal out if that had been his main target. It's because of that reason that we have to do some thinking. I personally am not convinced that my theory is true anymore. I think I was just wrong, to be honest. What is the other alternative here? Well, there is the potential that Putin is trying to create some weird, distorted recreation of the USSR without the communism, but with the authoritarianism. This would line up almost perfectly with the speech that Putin made the other day, talking about recognizing the independence of these states in eastern Ukraine. On top of that, Putin and Russia have troops in Belarus now, and they will never leave. That state is nearing on being quite literally a puppet. If Russia seizes control of Ukraine, or even just a significant portion of the country as well, then the same will be true for them there. Kazakhstan, a couple of months ago, had Russian troops deployed to it for the first time in its history under the CTSO agreement. What we're seeing here could be Russia trying to turn itself basically back into a superpower, back into the USSR. Of course, its power has been waning, it's been losing influence on the world stage, it has an awful economy that is incapable of growth because of the authoritarian nature of its governance, and there's hardly any wealth for its citizens either. Adding another 70 or 80 million people from Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, maybe even Moldova would give Russia far more influence on the world stage, and maybe that's where Russia and Putin are going with this, but again, Christ, no one really knows. The reality is here that seriously few people actually expected this to come and to come so quickly. Even the Western military, which has been warning us for weeks about this full-on invasion, they didn't actually prepare for this, and even the Ukrainian government have been telling people that they don't expect Russia to actually invade. Now, one final note here, Stop the War groups have been nothing but detrimental, calling for de-escalation on the side of the West. People like Jeremy Corbyn have been calling for us to just allow Russia to do what it wants to avoid war, and yet here we are with war anyway. These people are idiots first and foremost, and cowards second. If nothing else comes from this, at least let those who think that Corbyn is a good man finally awaken to the truth that he supports imperialism as long as it doesn't come from the West. Now that is it for the day, guys. We will of course come back and cover this again as more developments come out. I will keep you updated. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and a comment to bless the YouTube algorithm. If you want more content like this, then check out our Patreon and join our community of investors. You get access to our Discord, loads of exclusive content like insight into my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. There's a link in the description to masterworks.io, a site that allows you to buy fractional shares of art from world famous artists like Banksy, which can be a great way to diversify your portfolio with non-market correlated assets. It's completely free to sign up, you don't have to buy anything, you don't have to hand over any card information, so if that sounds interesting, then make sure to check it out. There's also a link in the description to BlockFi, which will give you up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you use it. You can also get 9% interest on stablecoins like USDC, which is a far higher rate than you'll get from any savings account these days. Just make sure not to use Tether. Thank you all for the support, thanks for watching, stay stoic, until next time.